guys, welcome to the SpED space. My name is Nick Coletti, and I'm here today. I'm solo. It's my first episode just by myself, but we're going to keep it entertaining. We're going to keep it fun. Last couple times I had a parent on, I had a psychologist on, and I'd love to continue to have more guests on the show. So if you're interested in being on, if you have any kind of relationship to special education in any way, even, it could be direct, obviously, as a parent, it could be a service provider, or even if you're a general education teacher or a police officer that deals with kids, whatever it may be. I'd love to hear from you. You can check me out at the spedspace@gmail.com, but let's get right into it. Hello, I'm getting my picture taken. I figured I'd start today. Obviously, if you've been listening to the show so far, thank you very much. If it's your first time, welcome. I've been interviewing people and having them on the show, but I didn't really get to talk too much about myself and what my connection is to special education. So I have quite the story, and I'm gonna keep it kind of short today, mainly because I don't have I didn't really prepare so much with telling my story, and I definitely know I'm gonna miss things, but at least to give you some kind of basic understanding of what my understanding and qualifications are to speak about the field of special education, and therefore kind of what my lens is and where I come up with my understanding of what's happening. So when I was in college, after my freshman year, I was voluntold to get a job that summer. Not that I didn't want to get a job, but I thankfully was hired. I had a family friend that was running the extended school year program in the town that I'm in right now, and that's essentially summer school. And I got hired as a paraprofessional. Back then, you didn't have to have a college degree or anything yet. Maybe you had to have an associate's degree, a 2-year degree at that time. I'm not quite sure. But either way, I was hired, and I worked that summer, and it was just for 6 weeks. It was just, a fun 6 weeks of time. But I got to work with a bunch of different kids with special needs. Now, that was my first year, so I didn't get thrown into anything crazy that first year, but I definitely got, I got my feet wet. It was good money. At the time, being a college kid over the summer, it was great money. It definitely was, it was a fun job. It was something different than most kids work over the summer, so it was a good experience. I did that for the 3 more years over the summers during college, right? So I would go to college for the year. I went to UConn. I got a degree in sociology. I actually focused on education there. Incidentally, I had no interest in being a teacher at all. Did not like school. I'll flash back to that at some point, but I did not do well in college. I did well. In high school, my first 2 years, I did not do well. I just didn't do my work. I didn't like school. So the thought of going back into a school after college was, didn't even cross my mind. However, I needed to get a degree in something, and I didn't really know what to do. I enjoyed sociology. There was a focus on the sociological impacts of education, however you want to word it. So I got a degree in sociology with a focus on education. My last year, I went and worked in the summer school again, and I graduated. And I needed a job for the fall. So a buddy of mine, who also, I got him a job that summer, suggested that we apply to be full-time paraprofessionals. And that we did. And funny enough, we ended up being at the same school. That year, that summer, was the first time I worked with a kid with autism who was nonverbal. And to this day, that child was by far, love the kid, by far the most difficult kid I've ever worked with. That could be because of my experience level at the time, which was, none. I didn't have any training in working in education. I had the experience of working in the summer schools, but I didn't really have a true understanding of what autism was. What do I do with this? How do I even support this kid? He's a bundle of laughter and fun. But, he also is headbutting me and stuff. So I was like, what's going on here? This is a lot. So I got a job at the school that kid went to. So I ended up being his paraprofessional we split the days. So I had him, I believe, in the afternoons. But either way, I ended up, getting a job and working with this kid. And I also got placed in a kindergarten classroom with a little girl who had autism, but who was verbal. So I got to see kind of two ends of the same spectrum, if you will, of autism. And that is the start of kind of what led me down to this path where I'm sitting in front of you today. I worked with these guys for the year, and I went back the next year, and I ended up being a paraprofessional in total for about 5 years. Paraprofessional is if you're not sure what that is, it's a teacher's aide, maybe called a professional assistant. It might be called a paraprofessional. Those are usually the names that are given to it. An aide, I think I said that. Teacher's assistant, teacher's aide. But you're someone that works directly with kids with special needs. Some kids on their IEP, their individualized education plan, and we'll get to that later. But basically the plan that a team decides what a student needs to be successful in order to access the education and curriculum, the general education curriculum as best they can, decides whether a kid needs a paraprofessional or not. So some kids, and in my case, I was always working one-on-one with kids. Sometimes I would be one-on-two, depending on the needs. But I was always with kids that were physically aggressive because my other background, I didn't at the time, but now as I sit in front of you, I'm a black belt in jiu-jitsu and I teach jiu-jitsu. So my ability to handle physically aggressive or students with physically aggressive behaviors is a little bit higher than your average person, to be humble. I have a lot of experience with it. So it's a little easier for me to deal with the physical behaviors and keep everyone safe. I've had, knock on wood, I haven't had to do anything recently within the last, I think I've had one incident in the last 4 or 5 years where I had to put my hands on a kid. But when I first started, those first 5 years I was a para, easily thousands of physical not altercations, not the word, but physical management situations where I had to keep people safe. And no one ever got hurt. I never got hurt. Not an adult ever got hurt when I was controlling the situation. So I had a lot of success with it. So the district kept, putting me with kids that were very physically aggressive. And it was great because it gave me an opportunity to work with kids that were otherwise very physically, I don't want to use the word, I want to choose my words correctly here, but difficult. Let's put it that way. They're very difficult to work with, and it could potentially be unsafe if you can't handle yourself and you can't handle them, and you can't handle your emotions. So I got to get a lot of experience because even though I was brand new, they threw me into the deep end immediately. So what first became kind of like I was a body that could handle really aggressive kids turned into I could really work with these guys. I could really support them, especially kids with autism. That was kind of my bread and butter. So I continued to work as a paraprofessional for a few years, and mainly nonverbal kids. And when I say nonverbal, obviously it sounds like it's nonverbal, but it doesn't mean that they're non-communicative. Behaviors are communication. When we say behaviors, it's everything, literally everything that we do, right? Everything that we do is a behavior. Every action that we take is a behavior. So when a kid is headbutting you or when a kid is laughing, all of that is communication and all of that is feedback. And when you have a kid that is nonverbal, who can't vocalize those things in language that we use, they will find other ways to communicate. I realized this very early on. And learned this and understood it very early on. And the first thing I wanted to do was actually become a speech and language pathologist because I've, in my own beliefs in how special education works and how education works, communication is the most important thing. You need to be able to communicate. If you can't communicate, that's when really serious behaviors emerge. That doesn't necessarily mean you have to be verbal. Obviously, that is what we want ultimately, but communication is key. However, when I went to look at getting a speech and language pathologist degree, I realized I had to go back and get a completely different undergrad and then get a master's. And I was not about to do that. So I figured, you know what, that is not the right approach. Let me try something different. So I then continued to kind of look around the table, and this is my second year now, and I'm working with my guest from the first week, Melinda. I'm working with her kids, and again, I'm seeing, like, you know, I need to help these kids. How can I help their communication? How can I best help them? And I had a great special ed teacher. I'm not going to name drop her, but she hopefully I can get her on the show sometime. But she was a great special ed teacher that I was working under, and I saw how the system kind of worked, where a lot of people would come to her, and that included me being, you know, under her in a way, right? Like low man on the totem pole. And then you also had like district people and administrators coming to her, and she would take all of this feedback and put it together and kind of lead the charge with supporting this kid. Now, everybody, obviously, when you have an IEP meeting or a PPT meeting, in Connecticut anyways, when you have that team meeting that you go to discuss what the services are going to be for the kid, everyone has an equal voice. However, the special education teacher, at least in the district that I'm in, and where I've always been a teacher, I've worked other places, we'll get that, but where I've worked anyways, the SpED teacher really leads the charge. So I thought, okay, I'm going to go down that route. So in my third year of being a paraprofessional, or I don't know, 6th year, whatever it is now, I went back to school to get my master's degree and my teaching certification to be a special education teacher. I did that at Fairfield University right here in Connecticut, and I would do that at night. So my days basically looked like, for 3 years, I would be a paraprofessional all day. I would then go and teach jiu-jitsu to kids for 2 or 3 hours, and then I would go to school. And I was in a band, so then I would go to band practice after that. So that was my day. Those were my weeks, I should say. It wasn't like literally every day, but I mean, it was either working jiu-jitsu or going to get my degree, alternating days. And that's what I did for 3 years while working at this elementary school. About halfway through that, so after 3 years of working at the elementary school, I had an opportunity to go work at a middle school. Same thing. I was working with a child who was in 5th grade going into 6th, and I was his paraprofessional, and he was a big boy, and he was moving up to Western, and the person at the time that was kind of in charge of his program said it would be great if I could stay with him. I'm working really well with him. And I said I'd be more than happy to. So we kind of got it set up that I got to follow him to the middle school and got to work with a whole new age group. So during this time now, I've been working with kind of helping out with preschool sometimes every now and there, but really K through 5, and then now 6 through 8, which is great. So getting a plethora of experience across the board. Also, during this time, I got to work with some other kids that were not on the spectrum. I got to work with some kids that were emotionally disturbed. It's now called, I think they've changed the name, I hope they have, to emotional disability, which is what it should be called. Just given, emotional disturbance kind of has rightfully so, a negative kind of connotation to it. So emotional disabled, emotionally disabilities. So I got to work with some of those kids as well. And again, if you're new to special ed, or maybe if you're not, but if you're not familiar with the different disability categories, emotionally disturbed is it's a wide range, a very wide range. But again, given my experience, we're talking about, at least in my case, kids that are physically aggressive and or a danger to themselves. So kids that would, I think I mentioned it a few weeks ago, but if I didn't, kids that would run onto the building, run right into a busy street with cars, kind of thing, right? So a dangerous situation, if you let them get away from you, and or if they do get away from you, being able to go track them down and get them back into the building safely. So that was the population that I worked with mainly as a paraprofessional, and it was fun. It was I loved that. I still enjoy that. I'm much better at making sure those situations don't even happen in the first place now. But at the time, I was learning, I was under other people, and that's what I did. So I go to school. It takes me 3 years. It takes me 2 years to get my master's and 1 more year to get my teaching cert. And I graduate, get my teaching cert, and I decide that I actually want to go work and live in Hawaii. So I started as a special ed teacher out there. It was pretty awesome because while it was my first year teaching, literally no one, teachers and students, they were always shocked when they're like, how long have you been teaching? I'm like, this is my first year. And the kids just straight up didn't believe me, which was funny. I mean, they were like, okay, so you're a liar. And I'm like, no, I'm not lying. But I had a great time out there. That was a great experience. Out there is where I got to work with a whole different set of kids. So out there, I was the teacher now, right? So I got to work with, I still hung out with my population that I'm used to. You know, I had my own class. I actually taught a functional science class, and I co-taught science out there. So co-taught is where you have a general education teacher and a special education teacher in the same room. In my experience, it's wonderful. Every single co-teacher that I've ever worked with, and shout out to all of you. I love all of you guys. I always had a fantastic experience. Straight up. It was always good. I have nothing negative to say. However, outside of my experience, I have heard of teams of teachers that have struggled, right? Personality clashes, whatever that may be. So that can be tough. But when it's done well and it's done right, I think it's fantastic. And the point of it is you have kids in the room that have an IEP that receive special education services, and then kids that don't. And if you do it really, really well, the kids are always going to know who's who, but you set it up so you get to a point where they really don't know who, like all the kids will come to both teachers. For example, when I was working in Hawaii, I did a back-to-back class of science, and the first in 7th grade. So the first, I did 6th, 7th, and 8th, and the 7th grade had 2 different periods. The first class, the gen ed teacher would deliver the instruction, and I would kind of float around the room. And we discovered, for whatever reason, the second class, it was a bunch of like tough boys, and they just seemed to do better when instead of me floating around the room, I was just in front of the room. That was the only class I ever did that with, but that was a flexible thing. So I would see what we're doing. Obviously, we would prep beforehand as much as we can. I'll get into prep time another day, but as much as you can, get ready. And I would just deliver the instruction in the second class, and the gen ed teacher would be the one kind of floating around, supporting, making sure the kids were getting, you know, the accommodations and whatnot. And that's just how we ran class. That flexibility can be really good. So I had a great experience with that. And with that, I still worked with kids with autism, but I also got a chance to work with kids with dyslexia and specific learning disabilities and ADHD and emotional disabilities that weren't as severe. I got to work with kids on the spectrum that weren't as severe, right? That could be in the classroom, that didn't have to have a one-on-one para with them. They just needed a little support here and there. So I got to start working a lot more with a lot wider of a population. Also, really good just experience overall. I mean, Hawaii's awesome. It's great. Nothing bad to say. The kids, there's a lot of turnover in teachers. I'm one of them. I'm not going to say I'm not. So the kids take a while to trust you, which was, you know, I'm very much a rapport-based educator. I think rapport is the most important thing that you need to do between you and a student before you're able to really educate them. Respect is important in all those things, and respect comes with rapport. So if you build a very strong rapport with your students, you're good to go. I'm not going to claim that I've always been successful with this. If my students ever happen to listen to this, the 2 students I'm thinking of, I know who you are. I'm sure you're like listening to this, like, I hate Mr. Coletti. I know you do. But I know that if I saw you in the street, you'd probably be like, all right, what's up, man? It's all good. But aside from those 2 kids, I've I've taught thousands of kids. I remember everyone fondly. It's been a good thing. Definitely rapport is super important. I'm just going to take a timeout. This is weird just talking about myself to a camera. Sorry if I ruined the immersion there, but you know, this is who I am. Anyway, I'm So I'm working in Hawaii, and I work for a few years as a special education teacher, and there's this position that they have out there called an autism consulting teacher, which that position, that person came to my classroom a few times to help work with some of the kids that had autism, and I thought it was really cool because they just got to go around to the entire district and support teams and be an autism specialist. So after I finished a few years of working as a special education teacher, I knew that they were opening a new position. They needed a fourth person on their team. I applied for the job and I got the job. And this was my first time doing a 12-month position. So I got to be an autism consulting teacher. Now, you're still a teacher. It's in the name as a teacher. So you're still on the same pay scale. It's a little bit more, obviously, because it's a 12-month position. But as far as your hierarchy, you're a teacher. You're on the same you should be on the same playing field as a teacher. However, what was a really cool experience about this is I wasn't treated as such, and I don't mean that in a power dynamic kind of situation. I mean it more in a way where of the change I was able to implement and the amount of support I was able to give to both the teams and the students. So the administrators would come to me and ask me my opinion, and then we would go with it. And that was new and interesting and different. And I appreciated the confidence that they had in me to make sure that we delivered the right programming and the right services to the kids. So that was a really fun experience. I was in charge of 36, something like that, students across 8 different, or across the entire west side of Kauai. Was where I lived. On the entire west side of the island, across 8, 9, or 10 different schools. I'm forgetting off the top of my head. So it was a really cool, unique experience. It was a great team. It was a small team, and I loved it. It was absolutely a dream job. Really, 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 really fun. And then you know what's coming. If you're keeping track of the timeline here, COVID hits. And I decide after that, and also I met my girlfriend, who I'm still with at the time, and she's living back around here. So I was like, you know what, let me make the change and come back to Connecticut, where I'm from, where I grew up. I was able to get a position at the middle school that I actually attended, funny enough, and got to work alongside some of the teachers that I had in middle school, who I will have on next week, the English teacher that I had, who I failed his class. And then we ended up working alongside each other, which I find hilarious. Great teacher. And, that's why I want to have him on, because he's an excellent teacher. But I came back here. I worked there for about 3 years. And something that I've been playing with for years and years and years, and I think the autism consulting teacher job really kind of led me down this path, or at least got me thinking, was to become an advocate. If you don't know what an advocate is when you as a parent, when you go to a PPT meeting, a parent and I got to forget that it's not just Connecticut listening. It's the team meetings that are done to support special education services for a student, right? So those meetings, when you go there, you're allowed to bring someone with you, an advocate, someone to advocate on your behalf and your child's behalf. This person can be a brother, a sister, an aunt, an uncle, a father, mother, another kid, a friend of a family, or a professional advocate, as long as they have some knowledge of the child, right? It's different than a lawyer, because there's no legal advice being given, right? I'm not a lawyer. I don't have a law degree. I can't give you legal advice. I'm not a doctor. I can't give you medical advice or anything like that. But you hire a professional advocate is going to be very knowledgeable about what happens in the special education process. Most advocates, which are very effective and good, are parents of kids who have gone through the system, which is a unique experience. Where I differ is the background, obviously, is I worked in special education for many, many years, in the field of special ed for many years. So I've written the IEPs, I've conducted the evaluations. That is where I differ a little bit from the majority of advocates. The majority of advocates are parents. Again, nothing wrong with that, but that's just kind of the difference. So backtracking here, I was considering what's the best way to help kids. And I started thinking about becoming an advocate. I saw parents bringing advocates in, and I thought, wow, that's a cool job. That's a little different. They're able to help the kids, and just something that I would consider, something that I would think about from time to time. As I kept teaching, the job has changed, and my teachers out there, my educators out there, you know what I'm talking about. The field of education has been changing dramatically over the years, and it's becoming, especially in the special education field, it's becoming just a majority of your time is spent doing paperwork, and the minority of your time is spent actually working with kids. And I didn't like that. I was getting pulled from classes all the time to do meetings, and I mean, it got to a point where every time I walked into a room, my kids would ask, "Hey, Mr. Coletti, are you teaching us today?" Because I would get pulled that often. And these kids, they trusted me, and I wanted to teach them. They wanted me to teach them, and I was just getting pulled all the time. So it got to a point with some other stuff that happened. I was like, you know what? I think the best way for me to actually support kids is to remove myself from the classroom and support them from the back end, support them from being an advocate, knowing the system, knowing the entire process of how things work, and support them that way. So I left last year and became an advocate, and I've been able to so far been growing the business and started this podcast and trying to understand a little bit more about special education in general, talk to some interesting people. But I've been able to, I feel, help the kids a little bit more successfully than I otherwise would have. I still get my fix teaching. I teach jiu-jitsu right in town. I still tutor some kids. So I still get my fix of actually teaching. I mean, I love to teach. That is definitely something I like to do. But being an advocate allows me to now make sure that the kids are getting the correct services and at least help drive the team into meaningful discussions to get the right services. So that's been fun. So that's where we are now. Excuse me. Some other interesting things. When I was getting my master's, okay, so 10 years ago, back it up 10 years, I remember sitting in the class one day, and we were talking about resource room. A resource room, academic lab, depends on where you live and what it's called, but basically it's the classroom that when you have an IEP, when you receive special education services, you get pulled into that room to work on your goals and objectives. So when I was in high school, after my freshman year of my sophomore, junior, and senior year, I had resource room. I went to resource room, and if you're following along and you understand the system, you know where this is going. But I was sitting in my master's level class, and I'm saying that with I'm not that I don't mean that in like a bragging way. Like I'm pointing out like this is 10 years after that fact, right? So we're talking. I'm in a high level collegiate education level class, and I'm sitting there and I'm going, wait a minute. For you to be in resource room means that you need to have that service in an IEP. Therefore, for you to be in resource room, you need to have an IEP. So I literally was sitting in my class, like just reading. We were kind of going over an IEP, a fake IEP. I mean, it's a real IEP, but not a real kid. And I'm coming to this realization, and I remember just sitting there and be like, wait a minute. Do I have an IEP? Did I have an IEP? So I go home, and I don't even think I got home. I think I got in the car and called my mom immediately and was like, hey, did I have an IEP? And she didn't know what that was. And I go, did I have any paperwork from back when I was in high school? And thankfully, she keeps everything. so she had all the paperwork. And so I go home and lo and behold, I read my own evaluation reports and my own IEP, and I get to see, like, I remember it. I don't remember ever seeing the documents, but I remember it's all followed back to me. I remember taking the evaluation tests. I remember some of the things that I struggled on. I remember what I got diagnosed with and how they explained it to me. But I didn't know that I was getting diagnosed with a disability. They were just telling me kind of what my strengths and needs were. So it was, I'll go find it so I don't misspeak. And I'll bring it in sometime, and I'll actually like kind of go through my own IEP because I think it would be interesting. But I remember the main thing was writing. My main support that I needed was writing, and so that I got that, and it helped a lot. And I love to write now, and I think writing's one of my strengths. So they did a really good job amongst the high school special education services that I received, as well as practice in college, and then my postgraduate or the master's program. So it was good. It was good. So yeah. So I also myself had an IEP, and I had an IEP from sophomore year of high school. I guess I got it at the end of freshman year of high school and had it till the end, till I graduated. And that was eye-opening. And it helped drive my practice a lot, because I think it would have helped immensely if I understood. And now, maybe that's my own fault for not really understanding. But, my parents definitely never really talked to me about it, or at least I don't know if they understood it enough to explain it to me in the way that needed to be explained, right? I remember seeing the results of the test and whatnot, but I didn't understand that what I was looking at was a special education report, right? I didn't know that. So one of the things that I did after discovering that I, it's weird to say that I have a disability. Like I got to learn more about that. I don't consider myself to have a disability in the sense that it was a specific learning disability. And then I also had a speech thing along with it. I don't really consider that. That's my own thing, right? I'm not saying it's a good or bad thing, but what it helped drive home when I was working with parents and working with kids is the importance of being transparent. Also, it was super powerful for me to reassure parents that it's okay if you get special education services. Now, I feel like nowadays it's not so much of a stigma to be in SpED, but it used to be, for sure. There used to be a big stigma with that. And every now and then you still come across that, and every now and then you come across kids that are offended by it or don't want to be seen as SpED or whatever, again, using their language. And being able to say, hey, I had an IEP. I was in resource room. I was in the same room that you're in. Your grades are actually way better than mine because I failed this class and I failed this class, and I had that teacher that you have right now, and I failed that class, and you're getting a C. So you're already doing better than I was. And it was really helpful to have those conversations with the kids. Also, I think it's critical for you, especially once they hit 5th, 6th grade and beyond, for them to understand that they have this IEP. I always got permission, obviously, and all the parents gave it to me. But every year, at the beginning of the year, and then when it was time for their annual, both pre and post, their annual IEP. So when you have an IEP, you meet every year annually, right? So if depending on how your school does it, but let's say you got qualified in March of 2021, you would get a meeting, an annual, and you got an IEP. Your annual meeting would be in March of 2022, March of 2023, and then March of 2024, you would do a triennial evaluation or reevaluation. And every year you're getting a new IEP along the way. And that triennial would determine if you still qualify for special education services. And if you do, you get another IEP and you keep going. So at the beginning of the year in the fall, and every year, or every time they had an annual come up, I would meet with them, and they all had their own folder with their IEP in it and all of their data and all the things that I was tracking. And this is maybe a suggestion for some special education teachers out there. But I would go through everything with them. Mostly, I mean, there were some things I wouldn't, if it didn't really matter to them. Like I wouldn't go through the what I wouldn't go through all the nitty gritty, just like check boxes and things like that, but the big things, right? So your the plop, the plep, it changes every year, I feel like, but the present levels of performance, of educational performance, I would go through their goals and objectives, and especially the goals and objectives, because they need to know what they're working on. And then their accommodations, right? So they know, hey, I get a calculator on this test. Hey, I get extra time on this. Hey, I get to go take this in Mr. Coletti's room if I'd like to. Hey, I get to sit in the front of the room if I'd like to. It's really important for them to know those things. And the teachers always were good. I never had any problems with teachers not providing accommodations, but it empowers the students to be able to speak up for themselves. And it was really important. And I remember that helped drive I did that from day one. I did that from the first time I became a special education teacher. My first year, I started that practice, and it helped immensely. I remember I had this one kid in Hawaii, and I had him. He was when I came there, I started as a 6th grade teacher, but I had kids in all 3 grades that were, I believe, yeah. Oh, no. He was a 6th grader, so I had him in 6th, 7th, and 8th. So at the end of 6th grade, we were talking about, he was telling me he didn't want to be in the resource room anymore. He didn't want to be in the class anymore. And he was he was one of those kids that could kind of like, he could be a leader and he could be a follower. Like he could kind of fall in. It just kind of depends on who's around him. But if he wanted to, he could be a leader. And he said to me, he's like, I want to, Mr. Coletti, I actually, in Hawaii, they just call you Mr. It's not like a bad thing, but they just call you Mr. or Miss. You can really correct them, but it's also just, it's normal. So it's different cultural things. So hey, Mister, I don't want to be in this class anymore. And I asked why. I'm like, is it because I smell funny or anything? Stupid stuff like that. And he said, no, I want to be in PE or whatever class that he wasn't in, and I want to do photography, whatever it was, right? But he wanted to do something else. He didn't want to be in there. And I knew he was capable, right? Sometimes you have kids that I always know they're capable. They're going to they have a long way to go. He didn't have that long way of a go. He had dyslexia, so he still needed to learn quite a bit, but he could access the class. He could do the work. And so I explained to him, I was like, listen, you don't need to be in that class. And he kind of perked up. He's like, what do you mean? I was like, you have this document that we talked about, the IEP. If you exit special education, you don't need to be in this class. And he was like, I want to exit. I'm like, well, you can't just exit. You have to meet your goals and objectives. You have to show that you can read at least within a grade level of where you're supposed to be, if not ideally on grade level. And you have to show the dedication. You have to show it in your grades. And we put together a plan, and he had to get, he was in all general education classes. I was like, okay, you need to get these grades. I forget what it is now, but basically all A's and B's. You need to show mastery of these goals and objectives. And then when I test you on they used to do these annual tests. You need to show this level of competency at this point in the year. And I gave him those, and I helped him work towards them. Obviously, I'm not just going to tell him and then, leave him hanging. But it was like, if you want to do this and you show me that you're going to do it, I mean, it's my job to help you there, but I'll like, let's go really hard on this. Like, let's really, really try, because if you're going to put in this effort, this isn't, a light undertaking. And he did it. He did it. And it was awesome. And it was so awesome. And he exited special education in the middle of 7th grade. And what was really cool is all of the other kids see him exit and they go, hey, wait a minute. You can leave this class? And I go, yeah. And they're like, well, I want to leave the class. And I'm like, well, you need to do X, Y, and Z. And then all of a sudden, all these other kids are working their butts off trying to earn their way out of the class too. And it's like, if the kids don't understand that in the first place, that's even an option, right? They're not even going to try that hard. They're not going to work for it. Now, that's not the case in every situation. There's kids that need special education services, and they're going to need it their entire time in school. This is just a specific population that I'm talking about. And this derived from my experience, understanding that I myself had a disability and had an IEP and didn't really fully understand it. And I think understanding and communication is so powerful that is how we really break through to helping out students, bringing teams together to make sure we have the right services. And ultimately, that's who we are as human beings. What are we without communication, right? I'm sitting here right now, hopefully, got an audience here, but speaking to you guys and creating a community where we can work together to learn more about special education, learn more about the human experience, bring people in to have meaningful conversations and communicate. And that's ultimately what we're trying to do. So, all right, I guess I could talk a little bit longer than I thought. I thought it was only going to be like 5 or 10 minutes because I'd forget things. But that's the long and short of it, my story thus far. If, any of that interests you and you want to be on the show, like I led off with, please reach out at the spedspace@gmail.com. If you need any support with your child's special education plan, I am an advocate. That is what I do, full time. So please check me out. My website is www.greenwichseadvocates.com. I'll put that in the description below. And I'm more than happy to give you a consultation and help you out with, with whatever you may need. I'm very honest about the help that you may need. I've probably had more people call me and I'll tell them you don't need an advocate. Just ask this question. And if you hear any response except for, X, come back to me. And that's usually, you just need to ask. Sometimes you just need to know the right information and ask the right question. And, you'll get what you need. Sometimes though, you do need an advocate. Sometimes, honestly, I'll be honest with you too. Sometimes you need a lawyer, right? Sometimes you need to take it up that notch. If there's a civil rights violation or a violation of the IEP that's like, bad or gross or something that's a little bit beyond what an advocate could take care of, you might have to bump it up. But before you get there, give me a call, shoot me an email, whatever it may be, and I can help you out there. If you want to be on the show, obviously definitely open to having people on. And yeah, thank you guys for listening. That's it. This is an awkward outro. I need to practice this. I'm still talking and you're probably closing it, but that's okay. All right. Have a great day. Bye.